Greetings, programs, and welcome to a little look at Manor, which has just come out into early access and I think has generated a fair amount of interest. It was apparently one of the most wishlisted games on Steam for a while, and I'm sure that the developer, well, hopefully they've done very well out of that in terms of sales. Now it's gone into early access. But I do need to emphasise that part, early access. There are some fairly well-developed parts of this game. Like, there's good groundwork to it, but there's a lot still left to be done, I think. It's got a ways to go before it can catch up with the likes of Banished or Farthest Frontier, just in terms of, like, content and mechanics. It does have some notable differences, though, and I think it's those notable differences that have captured people's imagination somewhat. Now, this I've actually had my eye on since, when was it, like 2 years ago? There was a Steam Next Fest where a demo came out, and it quite caught my eye. I think it caught a lot of people's eye, and I didn't do a video at the time, but I was a little bit tempted. Part of the reason that I was put off is that the demo was a little bit janky, and basically you couldn't save at all. You just had like a couple of hours to play, and once you were done playing it, you know, that village that you'd made was gone forever, essentially. And I even considered asking for an early key, but I thought I might as well actually just wait till the release version comes out, because what I learned from other people's channels is that whatever they were doing in that preview version wasn't going to carry over to the released early access version. So I thought I would just wait and see what the actual released version was like. So this game, as if you are unaware, I mean, if you're watching this, you've probably watched somebody else's video already, I would imagine. But essentially it is a settlement builder, but it's got some extra things going on top of that, including what do you call it, a real-time battle system, like essentially not quite Total War, but yeah, that style of, you know, you've got units to command groups of soldiers, and you can send them to go and fight bandits and other groups of soldiers, but that part is a little underdeveloped at the moment and definitely will need some balancing. But what is a bit different than any other game is that those guys they're just your guys, they're just the people that you've called up from the village. There are very few professional soldiers available in this game. Once you've built your home manor, you get a small retinue of standing soldiers, but everybody else that you call up are just men of the village, essentially. And even other games that do have that kind of soldiery system, like Farthest Frontier, you're basically building your village up to the point where you can support a separate soldier class. That's not the case in this. So losses that you take from soldiers are going to impact your overall economics and your overall village. But once you start spreading out a bit, that'll be a bit less of an issue, because this is just one region of the map. There are, in fact, multiple regions of the map. But almost all of them have been claimed by the rival lord, and this is one of those quite underdeveloped mechanics at the moment. They basically claim land, and they don't actually seem to do anything with it in terms of building up villages or anything. And I think the next patch, they've said they're going to make it much less aggressive in terms of the rival lord taking over land. So I can't really expand into any of my neighbouring bits because I don't have anything like the manpower to combat them. I don't have the cash to hire mercenaries, and there is an influence mechanic for claiming I think it's, yeah, there we go, claim with influence, but I'm a long ways off having enough influence as well. So for now, I'm just stuck in this one tiny region. There is also, when you start playing, the option to just play the village building side. It actually asks you if you want to do I think there's 3 options actually. I can't remember what the third one is, but it asks if you just want to kind of do a sandboxy, just build a village, build up the economy, don't have to worry about combat. This is the kind of middle mode where you do have to worry a bit about combat, and then there's third mode, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I've backed out into the main menu for a second just because it was bugging me that I couldn't remember. So yeah, there we go. We've got the peaceful option, and it does have a victory condition, but the challenge is basically just building the economy and not screwing yourself too much. You've then got this somewhat combat option, which has got the victory condition of conquer every region. And then you've got the kind of harsher difficulty option, where I presume you're just going to get attacked a lot more frequently by raiders. So yeah, there's also some other like more granular difficulty options. So you can really go in and pick, you know, exactly what you want your end goal to be. So it does have some nice flexibility, and I presume at some point there will be more than one map as well, because it does only like it. This is clearly going to be a drop down at some point, but at the moment it only has that early access map. So there will be a variety of scenarios. Maybe even there'll be some kind of map randomizer thing, like you get in Banished or Farthest Frontier. But it's fixed at the moment, which is definitely a limit on its replayability. This is also the screen you see when you're first starting off. This doesn't make any difference to your character model. I think even if you pick a female character model, you still get the same first-person view character. There's a reasonably nice coat of arms customization thing. I mean, it's not quite as... you can't quite as get into the details as you can with, say, the one in CK3, but you can still do some reasonably nice variations in it. So, you know, it gives you a few things to play with. Anyway, back into the game. I have a reasonable number of people. This is after about 10 hours, but a lot of that's been spent on normal speed, just watching my citizens putter around. You can actually speed it up fairly considerably. I was on Reddit. I was reading somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I've played 10 hours and I think I've done everything there is to do at this point." And the guy basically like sat on fast forward times 12 for quite a lot of it. So you can do that, but I think a lot of the charm of the game is the aesthetics of it. I think this is really what sets it apart from other titles, because a lot of other titles, they rely on grid-based mechanics. Everything just has to kind of align to a square grid, and it lacks a certain something when a game does that. I mean, Farthest Frontier, like I said, pretty developed mechanics, pretty fun game, but it does feel very artificial. Everything's down in nice, neat squares for the most part. This, however, has the ability to mix things up a bit. Now, a lot of buildings are, you know, you plonk them down, and yes, it's a square plot, but you don't necessarily have to put them exactly perpendicular to the road. What does more set it apart is the residential areas, the Burgage plots. And most of these, I think, are now level 2. I've probably got a level 1 somewhere, but yeah, you can essentially click and draw and drag a border, and it allows you to have some interesting variations. So you can try and put down, say, a single plot like this, and you can see there it's actually got a fairly smart border snapping system, so it will snap to the borders of other things, in this case this field, and you can have quite irregular borders. Or let's say we want to put down multiple plots at once, we can draw quite a nice big area like this, and it actually does tell you, this is going to have space for extra stuff. So the one on the left there, for instance, will have a main house, and you can actually expand it if it has that symbol there, the little house plus, to have space for 2 families on a single plot. And then this bottom area here means that there's space for a workshop area. And this is another unique thing that this game does that I haven't really seen any other game do. In fact, if we snap to the border there again, that's actually going to be 3 plots, but one of them's going to be a little bit cramped. And you can, you know, if you want to do a sort of mostly triangular plot, you can do, and you can make all kinds of nice curves with the roads, and it all just leads to a very much more organic feeling experience than a lot of other games. So yeah, that is a real draw of it for me, just that alone. It feels a lot less like you must fit everything into these little boxes than a lot of these other settlement games. And I think that for me is where a lot of the personal appeal for this game comes from. And there's also, with any early access game, there's like, well, what might it become as well? But that's kind of a double-edged thing, because what it might become is not necessarily something that you might enjoy quite as much as the idea of what you thought it was going to become. So you always have to try and evaluate these things on what they are right now rather than the promise of what they might become. Anyway, what else can I point out? Well, I can talk a little bit more about the workshop system. It does require, in some cases, generating enough wealth. And at the moment, I've got some trading going on, which is sucking up most of the wealth I'm generating. But by upgrading to level 2 plots, the houses generate a bit more regional wealth. And I am using that to, I mean, I'm selling some stuff, but I'm using that to get stone as well, because it does work on a fairly standard deposits system. So we've got berry deposits, we've got iron, we've got some animals over there, that's stone there. So we do have some stone fairly close, but I just haven't bothered. Like, I could send some guys over there, like build a path, build a quarry, but I've kind of got a bit of a manpower shortage problem at the moment, so I'm just importing stone right now. But I went off on a tangent there because I was going to talk about the plots themselves. I mentioned the currency, and that sent me off on a tangent, because a lot of the actual additional things require some currency to go with them. So I've got this plot here, for example, that has a chicken coop, and that will generate a small number of eggs that go into the food production pools. You can see what food I've got there. So most of it consists of berries. We do have some wheat production going, which has got its own little chain. So I've got a windmill, and then we've got a communal bakery. But you can also build a specialised bakery on a Burgage plot, and certain of these things are considered artisanal workshops, because, you know, this game represents an era where we don't have like lots of production lines or anything like that. We had families that were doing sort of one specific thing, which is, at least in English, you know, a lot of surnames come from professions. It kind of goes back to this era of there's starting to be a bit more centralised control, and so kings and dukes and counts want to know how many people there are, and so people have to come up with surnames for things, and a lot of people chose their professions as their surnames. Whereas I happen to know in the Netherlands, for example, a lot of surnames came from the places where people lived, or maybe physical characteristics. So you might have someone called De Groot, which means the tall, literally translates as the tall. So yeah, clearly somebody had a tall ancestor that came up with that because they weren't very imaginative, or else they wanted people to think they were tall. I don't know. Anyhow, some workshops give a passive income. So the vegetable garden, for instance, I've got one over here which provides some vegetables every year. Not a huge amount. I think you'd have to have multiple of these for it to make any appreciable contribution to your food supply. And the actual size of the plot does make a difference for how much is being grown as well. But yeah, others require basically the specialisation of the entire family, as with this plot here. So they are turning the linen, which I am turning from flax into linen at the weaver's workshop, and we've got a flax field over here. So that's all ultimately going to this chain, and at the moment there's a bit of a choice. You could have multiple Burgage plots, multiple households producing different things, or you could just change them as needed, I suppose, if you're a bit more limited. But at the moment we're just producing gambesons, which are kind of cloth padded armour essentially for my men of the village to use when they are called up to bear arms. But we can also produce cloaks and just general clothes, and I think they'll produce a basic level of clothes themselves, but I'm not quite sure as to that at the moment, because a lot of other games, like you go back to Banished, you go back to Farthest Frontier, and you'll have things like, well, they need clothes to stay warm in winter, they need tools to do their jobs more effectively. I don't know if there's that level of things yet going on in this game. So just the fact that we're producing linen cloth seems to be enough to meet at least the basic clothing requirements of the houses. They don't necessarily need clothes, they just need material. And so I don't know if that's going to change over time, or if that's sort of intentional. When we say clothes, it's more kind of a luxury item, like maybe a tier 3 Burgage plot requires specifically crafted clothes. I don't know, but I guess we'll see. A lot of this stuff is going to be sort of subject to change and balancing. As for how this is all distributed, well, it's got the usual kind of marketplace system, but it's a little more dynamic than you might have seen in other games. You basically designate a market plot, and it has, however big it is, dictates how many stall locations it can have, and they will just populate automatically based on like what stuff you've got elsewhere. But I'm not 100% sure how this works at the moment, because we have, for instance, multiple food stalls and multiple firewood stalls, and I don't know why we need multiple stalls. I don't know if that's just to do with the number of families working at different related things. But for instance, the fact that I've got multiple firewood stalls is maybe to do with the fact that I have multiple families working at the woodcutter's lodge. Maybe. But it doesn't feel like that would then need to translate to multiple stalls. So I don't know why that is working that way exactly. There's also, and again, I don't know if this is something that's going to be expanded out elsewhere, or this is maybe a sort of temporary placeholder feature, but we've also got these carts that you can place once you've unlocked them, which will give you essentially just a passive income, and you can have one of these carts in a marketplace of each type per region, basically. So you can't just spam these over and over. They provide a little extra bump to your baseline food and firewood income, because those are your basic survival needs. But it is essentially, do they have food to eat, and do they have firewood so they can keep themselves warm? There's also stuff like water, and I presume, and I don't know if fires are a thing yet, but how it works certainly in Farthest Frontier, if you've got a fire, they will go to the nearest well and form a bucket chain to put it out. But if there are fires and disasters in this, I've not seen them yet. There might be crop-related things like droughts or disease, but again, that sort of seems like it's a bit, something that might be added later. Anyway, the church is finished. That's quite nice. I've actually got. I haven't had any people die yet, but we've got the potential to bury people at the church. I don't know if there's any. I was wondering if there might be some things that the upgraded church does, but I think it just adds to their sort of overall satisfaction, their overall happiness with living in the village, is having a better church, which is what the approval rating is all about, basically. Various things affect that. They don't like taxation. I've had to turn taxation off. They do like having, you know, plenty supplies of things. Having a church, having a tavern, I think will help if I can get that chain up and going. But I kind of need more people to move to the village for that. And in order to get more people to move to the village, you need at least a 50%, I think over a 50% approval rate. So that can be a bit of a bottleneck right there. I don't know how the game does in terms of like natural family growth. In Banished, that tended to be a fairly fast cycle. In Farthest Frontier, a bit less so, but Farthest Frontier and this game as well, I've not really had the sense in either of those games of ever having to suffer a population crash, whereas in Banished, that was one of the big challenges of getting any new village set up, is managing your demographics really carefully. And I don't think any game since then has really managed to do the same thing, or even maybe set out to do the same thing at that same level. They've all been a lot easier, a lot kinder, and not even really let you have the option of making the demographics something a bit harder to deal with. So one of the other the key features, and I don't think this really has a parallel in either of the other two games I've talked about, but maybe something more like Surviving the Aftermath, where you have a well, in that game it's more of a tech tree, but in this game it's kind of just I don't know, maybe something like City Skylines is more of an applicable reference point, whereas your village meets certain milestones, it becomes like at the moment it's basically get up to having some level 3 Burgage plots, and that will unlock an extra development perk point, whatever you want to call it. And that some of these allow you to unlock entirely new things, some of them just enhance certain things. So, you know, for instance, setting up trade routes at the moment is a variable amount. That will make it so it's always a maximum of 25, which is a lot cheaper than some of the existing trade routes. We've got this one here, which unlocks the ability to create Armourer's Workshop and produce helmets, which are obviously, and mail armor, which is going to be much better in terms of protection than Gambeson's. We've got things to do with mines and charcoal, so that will turn firewood into charcoal, which makes everything a bit more efficient. And then deep mining, if you have a rich deposit, you can build a deep mine, which is sort of an infinite source. And I think Farthest Frontier does the exact same thing, basically. You've got kind of surface deposits of things, and then you've got deep deposits, which basically have it's functionally infinite amount. I mean, other games, like that's definitely not a new kind of idea. Like Surviving Mars did that. I'm sure other games have done that. So, yeah. It is maybe a little bit different than those games, though, in that you can't select a patch of trees or individual rocks or whatever and say, hey, I want you to mine this surface level stuff. You really do have to go and set up the buildings to do that first. So you don't have that early scavenging stage in this game as compared to other games. So I suppose that's another way in which it's a little bit different as well. So I don't know if there's much else to talk about, really. I mean, the combat I've not really experienced that much, because as I explained, any fight I pick at the moment, I'm just going to lose a bunch of villagers for no purpose. So I'm just kind of concentrate on trying to build things up, get new families coming in, and maybe get my village level up again. So we'll maybe finish this, because I wasn't aiming for this to be a particularly long video, and it's actually already longer than I thought it was going to be. We'll maybe finish this with a walk through the village, which is, again, another one of those eye-catching features which you just don't really get to see in other colony-type games, because I don't know, it's just not something they've thought to do. There's not that many games actually where you do get to take a ground level view of things. I mean, you kind of can in Surviving Mars with the free cam feature and get right in close and look at your domes, but it's not the same as having like an actual person that walks around the place and gets to see their citizens going about their lives and just, you know, see things from a different perspective. So yeah, I do think this is a pretty neat addition, and the fact that it's coming in on the ground level, as it were, of the game is yeah, it's pretty neat, and I presume that at some point there will be different presets to match the actual portraits presets that you're picking, so that you won't get that slight dissonance between. I mean, you know, I picked a portrait of a bald guy with a beard, and this guy is blonde and has a full head of hair. Still got a beard though, but yeah, definitely not the guy I picked. And I don't think, pardon me, I don't think it's going to ever be like, say, Mount and Blade, where you are in there, in the thick of it with your troops, swinging your sword. But I might be wrong, who knows? They might decide to go down that route, but if they did, you'd have to have the main character be basically unkillable. Maybe, you know, they could be knocked out, but if the Lord just gets killed like that, then who knows? It's also, you know, I could spend ages talking about stuff I'd like to see in the game as well, but that would be entirely speculative at that point. So yeah, this is basically kind of what there is at the moment. It's sort of a little bit limited. Oh, that's invisible wall. Why is that invisible? Oh, I think I know why that might be invisible wall. There is a little extended manor, well, they call it the castle planner. Basically, once I get enough materials, I can make the Lord's Manor a little more fortified. But for some reason, it's kind of put invisible walls there already. So yeah, at the moment, it's just the central manor house, and I presume this is pretty bare bones looking. I presume this will be all expanded upon later on. I mean, there's certainly a bug here where, because I initially planned it and plonked it down and then added another little bit of road, it's tried to adapt to the another little bit of road that I've put down, but I now cannot redo, like, if I wanted to bring the fence in here, I can't actually do that anymore, and I can't hit the reset button because the reset button says work in progress. So yeah, lots and lots of rough edges so far for stuff like that. You might even have noticed as you were walking past the weird glowing void inside the farmhouse, for example. So yeah, I'm sure there will be, like, there's a lot here that could be added, and I'm sure there's a lot that will be added, but it's kind of difficult to say at the moment beyond whatever the developer has put out. And I guess I will finish this by mentioning that, much like Banished, this is a solo dev project, which makes it fairly impressive. I mean, Banished itself was fairly impressive, I think, when it came out at the time. And when you open up the game and you get the little note from the developer, Greg, saying, I've been working on this for 7 years, you can see the 7 years has gone somewhere. You can see, like, the level of effort that's gone into even just what there is at the moment. But it also maybe makes me temper my expectation about this sort of getting really frequent updates or anything like that. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm definitely, having played it for this long, I've lost a little bit of the hype I had from the demo, because there has been stuff added since the demo, but it was really the village building that kind of grabbed my imagination. And the village building isn't too much beyond what was in the demos. It's just the kind of more region stuff and the bones of the combat system that's been put in place, and I think stuff like trade as well. So yeah, I'm going to temper my expectations on like the pace at which things get added to this game, but I think eventually this could be something pretty good. If, however, in the meantime you're looking for something with a bit more meat on its bones in terms of mechanics, then Farthest Frontier is pretty good. Like I've said, it's quite fun. Or even Banished. Banished has some pretty good mods going for it, which really expand the base experience and add a lot of buildings, add a lot of different things you can do with your resources. And honestly, you know, it's one of those ones I just kind of keep installed, and every couple of months I'll go back and play Banished for a couple of days just to see how my wee village is getting on, because Banished is still fun. It's still a lot of fun, that game. Anyway, I think that just about wraps up this look at the early access release of Manor Lords. I'll put a link down below to the game on Steam, and I'll throw in some links to Farthest Frontier and Banished as well, so you can go and check those out also. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.